And welcome to Colorado Decides, a joint production of Colorado Public Television, CBS 4, and KOA News Radio. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for joining us. Joining me tonight, Sean Boyd, political specialist from CBS 4 News, and political analyst Eric Sonderman. Tonight, we continue our coverage of the 2016 election by focusing on the U.S. Senate Republican primary. 5 candidates are vying to challenge the incumbent, Senator Michael Bennet. Join us for the next hour are Robert Blaha, Ryan Frazier, Daryl Glenn, Jack Graham, and John Kaiser. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate that. We're going to have a fun hour with all of you. I'd like to start the debate by just asking all of you to take 30 seconds and introduce yourself to our viewers. We'll go follow along the same line that we just did. Robert, could you please start?
Thank you. Thank you for hosting us, and thanks for being here tonight. You know, as a father, a grandfather, and a Christian, I got to tell you, our country's in disarray. And that's why I decided to get into this race. You know, a different wind is blowing across America. People are asking for people with different backgrounds and different experiences. And as a 35-year business guy that's written books about how to dismantle large organizations, this is my time. This is the opportunity that you can only dream of. And as we travel around the state, we hear over and over again, people are demanding different people, different abilities, and different experiences. That's what I bring. Thank you again for having us tonight.
Robert, thank you. Ryan?
Thanks for having us again. My name is Ryan Frazier. I'm running for United States Senate because I care about the heart and soul of our country. I was raised by a single mom who worked hard to raise 3 boys on her own. She taught us the value of a dollar, faith in God, to work hard, and that in America, if you're willing to work for it, there's an opportunity to make a life for yourself. I got in this race because I care about the heart and soul of our country, and I know we can do so much better. I look forward to an opportunity to engage in this conversation, to educate your audience, and have a constructive dialogue about how we move our country and Colorado back in a better direction. Thank you.
Ryan, thank you. Daryl?
Thank you very much for having us. I'm Daryl Glenn, Air Force Academy graduate, retired lieutenant colonel. I've spent 21 and a half years serving this country, 13 years as a conservative Republican. I just want you to understand, I get it. I understand the frustration that's out there. I've been campaigning since last January. I understand how frustrated you are. I'm going to fight for you. Let me be your next senator. God bless you.
Daryl, thank you. Jack?
Thanks, Dominic. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a career politician. I've never held office. I've never run for office. I had a successful 35-year career in business, including we formed our own company here in Colorado that's still thriving today. It employs hundreds of people, and it's ranked one of the best places in the state of Colorado to work. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, and I'm looking forward to our dialogue.
Okay. Jack, thank you. John?
My name is John Kaiser, and I'm a husband. I'm a father of 2 beautiful children. I'm a Air Force Academy graduate, Colorado native, and I'm a combat veteran that served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'm also the recipient of a Bronze Star Medal. In the private sector, I've spent many, many years helping businesses and people navigate what has unfortunately become an extremely complicated regulatory environment. And when I served you in the House of Representatives, I stood up for fiscal conservatism, and I look forward to this opportunity tonight. Thanks for letting us be here. You know, this is going to be a great opportunity to talk about policy, talk about issues, and really what separates us as Republican candidates for United States Senate. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate being here. We only have an hour, so let's get to it. Sean, start us off.
So Speaker Paul Ryan's budget plan calls for making Medicare a voucher-based program where private insurance would be purchased with federal subsidies. Do you support that? Do you support any changes to Medicare? And if so, what? And I think we're going to be starting with you, Ryan.
Well, John, absolutely. That I support the idea that we have to reform our entitlement programs. We know that not just Medicare, but Medicaid, Social Security programs, a number of federal programs currently just aren't solvent in the long term, and something needs to be done. And so we need to reform these systems to make sure that we not only meet the commitment, the promise that's been made to so many Coloradans, so many Americans that look to these programs to help them, in the case of Medicare, to receive their health care, but we need to make sure that they're there long term. And so the plan that Paul Ryan has proposed is not one I've had a chance to read. And so in general, in theory, I like the idea of making reforms to make sure Medicare is there long term for those that need it.
Okay, thank you. Daryl?
I agree with that. And the one thing that we need to look at when we're examining any sort of plan like that is the sustainability, whether or not it's fiscally solvent. And overall, we need to take a look at our debt. That's been the problem that we have. And I also believe that when we address that, we also need to take the opportunity to give more power back to the states. We need to minimally fund the federal government, but return more of that money back to the states and back to the individuals so they can invest in their prosperity.
Do you support the voucher plan or no?
I want to actually read that. I mean, I've heard some things about it, but I'm very leery about supporting any plan without reading it first.
Jack?
I like the plan, actually. I think the concept of vouchers for people to purchase their own coverage that's portable is an excellent idea. The concept that our healthcare coverage is tied to our employment, I think, has become obsolete. That was actually born back in the 30s during the Depression, when there were caps on compensation on salaries, and so employers competed for employees by providing healthcare coverage, and that is, a 60, 70-year-old concept. I think coverage needs to be portable. The fact that our healthcare coverage is tied to our employment is almost a form of indentured servitude. It's very, very difficult to change jobs today. I think our coverage should be with us permanently. It should be non-cancelable, and it should take us from the time that we're very young all the way through retirement. So I support that idea completely.
Thank you. John?
So I'm a conservative, and I absolutely believe in the free market. I believe that when people have choices, they make the choices that work best for themselves. So I know my grandmother's probably watching tonight. She's an avid viewer of PBS, and she's certainly on Medicare, and I want her to know, just like everyone's grandmothers to know and grandfathers, that if you are currently receiving entitlement programs, whether it's Social Security or Medicare, those are not going to change when I'm in the United States Senate. We're going to make sure we protect the commitments that we've made to you, because those are promises, and that's your money that you've been paying into, and you deserve that. But for a next generation, technology is changing quickly, and we need to be focused on different innovative ideas that will allow the free market to operate. And when we focus on the outcomes, when we focus on the doctor-patient relationship, and when we give the individual choice, I think that's when we will finally solve our healthcare crisis in this country.
Thank you. Robert?
Well, it's the fifth answer to the same question. I'm going to take it a little different direction. What I would say is that enough? Is that enough? If there's anything we've seen in this very broken system, it's that we need major reform and major changes. I like the idea of allowing the states to go out and the states to take 50 laboratories of the best thoughts and create the best ideas possible. The more we can get money out of Washington and the more we can get money to the local level, the better off we are. Right now we've got bureaucrats that, in our case, are 2,000 miles away that are making decisions about all of us in this room. I think if we can find partnerships in different ways to get the money out of Washington, get it to the local level, get it to the state level where people are actually making decisions that are best for us, is a key. And secondary to that, I think, as I said, these laboratories, we have 50 states that all should be able to compete in the free marketplace with the best ideas. Best idea wins. Free market wins every time. So that's my thought.
Thank you.
Eric, you want to get us to the next question?
Sure, let's shift gears here and talk about another very hot button issue these days, that being immigration. We'll start with you, Daryl, but specifically, the two parties both say immigration is a priority, and yet year after year after year, nothing gets done. With respect to the Gang of Eight bill, Senator Bennett being part of that a few years ago, that had a number of provisions that Republicans ought to like, from the expansion of E-Verify to $30 billion of new enforcement money, to doubling at least the fencing, yet once again that got nowhere. How do we ultimately solve this issue in a bipartisan manner? What does that solution look like, Daryl?
Well, it actually starts with following through. What you're seeing is there's a lot of frustration and there's a lot of blame to be had on both sides, Republicans and Democrats. And you need to first start with securing the border. Securing the borders and ports is extremely important. It's a national security issue. You can't do all those other things until you actually show a commitment to doing that. And then you actually need to, when you start thinking about the rules that are already in place, why don't we actually enforce the law? So many people want to jump ahead of A and B and start going to C. When we actually show that we can secure the border, when we actually enforce the rules that are on the books, and when we stop creating incentives for people to violate the rule of law, then we can actually get something done. People are tired of rhetoric. They want something done. I'm committed to doing it the right way.
Jack?
There are some core concepts in the in the legislation that was created by the Gang of Eight, and you've recited 3 good ones, frankly, we do have to secure our borders. I think that the problem that was in the legislation with the Gang of Eight is the fact that it required a path of permanent residency, if not citizenship, for the 11 million illegal immigrants that are in the country today. And that was not acceptable to many, many, many Republicans, including to me. I value citizenship far too much. At the same time, we have 11 million illegal immigrants here today. At least half, if not 80% of them, don't want to be here permanently. They want to be on an effective work visa program that will allow them to work here and go back home. So we do need an effective work visa program to service our economy. And so we need to put that in place. And if people do want to be here permanently, as well as if they want to be here on an effective work visa program, they do have to go through background checks successfully to ensure they're not terrorists, that they're not risks of criminality. They have to have health care coverage. Either they provide it or their employer should provide it. And if they can't prove those things and establish those things, then they should be deported. So I do think there is a path to resolving this. We just need to have the will back in Washington to actually get something done.
And John, and maybe I'll add to the question, what do you make of Mr. Trump's wall?
Well, I think the real frustration, Eric, that you talked about was that for about a generation, politicians have been talking about how we need to secure the border, or we need to enforce our laws. We know that problem exists, and the fact of the matter is the political will hasn't existed on either side. And when I talk about the immigration issue, I talk about it from a position of authority because I'm an intelligence officer. I'm a career intelligence officer, and now I'm currently assigned to United States Southern Command. So we're in charge of monitoring the threats that our country faces through South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. And so I understand uniquely how the threats that we face at home and abroad, and I know what it takes to keep us safe. The number one thing that we have to do is secure our border, because if we don't secure our border, nothing else really matters. We have to focus on securing our border, and that's not racist, it's not xenophobic, it's common sense. Because from a national security perspective, when we're talking about immigration, we are talking about national security. We need to know who's coming into our country, who they've been associated with, where they've been, and we also need to know that they came here legally, and that's just a common sense idea, and I look forward to working on that when I'm in Washington, D.C.
Robert?
I think the question you asked was the wall. And it's a tough question, but it's got to be addressed. So here's the answer. When you talk to the people that are border experts, what they'll tell you is in some places they would like to see a wall. In other places they would like to see an 80 to 120 foot wide area with 18 to 20 foot fences on both sides. So the issue is not really whether we need to secure the border. I think everybody up here would agree that we need to secure the border. I think you three would agree we need to secure the border. The issue is how. And the answer, I think, is pretty simple. We allow the experts to decide the best way to do it. We build what they feel is best, and what they will tell you is they want to see in some places a wall, in some places fence, in other places a higher percentage of drones and flyovers, and in other places more border agents. That's the answer. But the reason we need to secure the border is really pretty simple. We all have a home, and in that home we all have a doorway. We have a front door. And the reason we have a door is pretty simple. We want to know who's coming in and out of our home. And if you look at that on a national basis, we are not capable right now of understanding who's coming onto our shores. We do not have the ability to vet people as they come. So the real issue is vetting, secure the border, and do it in a very thoughtful way according to what the experts call for.
And Ryan?
Eric, I think we can talk about what they did in 2008, or we can talk about what we want to do. In the United States Senate, I believe that we have to get serious about actually addressing immigration. Absolutely. We got to secure the border. No conversation can really begin unless we have a serious effort to secure our borders, north and south for that matter. I've been down to the southern border. I've been down to Nogales and other communities along our border. One of the problems in D.C. and the reason we're unable to get things done is far too often both Republicans and Democrats alike are too focused on where we disagree. Look, we're not going to agree to amnesty. Bottom line. But here's where we can agree. We can agree on border security, and we can agree on reforming our work visa system so that those who want to work here, so long as they have an employer that has a job, can go through the system to work there. But for those who are here unlawfully today, there has to be some consequence to that. There has to be a penalty associated with that. And in doing so, paying that penalty and allowing people to get that work visa can ensure these folks are working legally in our country. And then we have to hold our employers accountable. We have to say we've secured the border, we've reformed our work visa system. Now we need employers to actually hold the line and be accountable to ensure the people they employ in this country are lawfully allowed to be in the country.
We're going to mix up the format a little bit and start with a short series of short questions. We're asking for short answers. It's a kind of a theme there, I think.
That could be hard
but
with this group.
that's
That could
true.
be
So
difficult with this
these
group.
aren't yes or no questions, but these are one-sentence answers. So we're giving you a little bit of leeway here, but again, try to stick to one sentence. Eric, kick us off.
I'm actually going to start with a yes or no. I hope it can be answered yes or no.
Good luck.
If invited, would you attend a gay wedding? Why don't we start at that end and come down, John?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
John?
At what point do you believe life begins?
I believe life starts at conception.
I believe in the sanctity of life in that conception.
Conception.
I believe deeply in the sanctity of life.
I don't know that was the answer to the question, Jack, but I do believe that life begins at conception, and I will protect life in the United States Senate.
Jack, do you want to follow up? When does life begin?
You know, I'm not sure. It strikes me that life begins at the moment of conception, and I respect that deeply. And that's why I respect the sanctity of life.
Eric?
The presumptive presidential nominee of your party has made utterances with regard to nuclear proliferation being not that big a problem, and even talked about it being okay if Japan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, and countries like that acquired nuclear capability. Do you agree or not? Jack, we'll start and come on down.
I couldn't disagree more, to be honest with you, Eric. I think we've abrogated our role as leaders globally in this context, and we've created all kinds of vacuums which have given the rise to the concept that the Japanese are giving consideration to the possible need for them to buy their own nuclear weapons if, in fact, we're not going to back them and provide them with that capability. I think the Iran nuclear agreement is a classic example. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
that's all
sorry. I missed. I was guilty of run-on sentences my entire life.
Thank you.
One
Daryl.
aside.
The last thing I want to see is more nuclear weapons out there. So we need to take a leadership role in making sure that we control that.
You know, I've never believed that the United States should be a policeman of the world. But I do believe we ought to be a deterrent to evil. And the proliferation of nuclear weapons among some of these regimes very much bothers me. And we need to make sure we do everything we can to prevent it.
Any way you look at what's happening in the nuclear world right now, it's probably not good if it's in bad actors' hands. And it's really that simple. You can look at it and you can say, well, in some of the cases, they're really good countries. To Ryan's point, I don't think we want to be the world policeman, but we've got to get a handle on this, particularly with the bad actors.
John?
Well, I'm an intelligence officer in the United States Air Force, and I deeply believe that we need fewer nuclear weapons. But what's really concerning to me, and frankly one of the big reasons I got in this race, is because of the Iran nuclear deal that Michael Bennett supported. And that gave Iran a clear path to a nuclear weapon. Now, I've fought the Iranians, and I know there is good and there is evil in this world. And frankly, the Iranian regime has killed thousands of Americans. They are evil, and they should never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. Michael Bennett thinks they should.
Okay. Sean, we'll do one more each.
Do you support a fair or flat tax? And I'm not sure what order we're in.
Jack, this we go to Daryl.
Daryl?
I'm closer to a flat tax.
I support a simpler and flatter tax system.
Simplified, flat, someplace for corporations from 35 down to low 20, for individuals in the teens.
John?
More simple, more fair, and flatter.
I do believe we need to cut our corporate tax rate dramatically. We're not competitive. And with regard to personal income tax rates, we need to simplify and go from 7 brackets down to 3 or 4 and make the whole game significantly simpler than it is today.
Eric?
I know this is not a scenario you want, but if Hillary Clinton is elected president in November, should the Senate confirm Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court? Ryan?
No, I don't believe so. In the United States Senate, one of my #1 responsibilities will be to ensure that whomever is nominated and ultimately, with the advice and consent of the Senate, is appointed, is someone who has a proven track record for upholding our Constitution and the rule of law as it was intended. I do not believe that Merrick Garland, in fact, demonstrates that track record, particularly on Second Amendment rights, among other things.
It's going to be Hillary Clinton making the appointment then. Are you going to get better than Merrick Garland? Robert?
I think we need to do better than that choice. I think that if you look at this one decision, it will be the seminal decision in the first 90 to 120 days in whoever is the president. So as a U.S. Senator, if that is not a selection that's consistent with the long-held values of conservative values and movement, I think we've got to stand up and boldly say, this is not the right choice. That's what a U.S. Senator should do.
John?
Well, I've been very clear on this, and frankly, the conservative leader, I've said that under no circumstance should Barack Obama or, God forbid, Hillary Clinton be allowed to replace a lion of the Supreme Court like Justice Scalia with someone that is a liberal that will, frankly, change America for a generation. I think when I think about my two kids, and I think about how the Supreme Court could change with Obama and a guy like Merrick Garland, who I would not vote for, I would not support, or, God forbid, Hillary Clinton appointing people to the Supreme Court, that really underscores how important this race is for the United States Senate, because there's no do-overs.
Jack?
I'm going to take your question literally. So, Hillary Clinton is the president of the United States. My next question is, who's controlling the Senate? Do the Republicans still control the Senate, or are we at risk of losing control to the Democrats? And under those conditions, I can tell you, Merrick Garland can look awfully good relative to what could come down the pipe if, in fact, Hillary Clinton is given an opportunity to nominate someone without the constraint of a Republican Senate. And so I think it's a really important question. I think we need to monitor what's going on to make certain that we're in a position to be responsive. The more information that we've got, the better from my perspective.
Right. Gentlemen, we're going to mix up the...
Sorry,
Daryl, go ahead. I
I
apologize.
definitely want to make sure we address this, because the premise is absolutely not going to happen. Hillary Clinton is not going to win. But I guarantee you I will only support a justice that's similar to Justice Scalia, a strict constructionist.
Okay. We have everybody? Great. We're going to mix up the format a little bit more. I'm going to have a specific question for each one of you. And basically, I was made the theme here, electability. So it's supposed to be a tougher question. You guys are tough. I think you'll be ready for this. Robert, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah.
You've broken the Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment several times during this campaign, attacking your fellow Republican. Are you worried that if you do not win the primary, that you have handed Michael Bennet excellent ways to attack the eventual nominee?
Well, you know, when you run for the U.S. Senate, it's a full game on. This is not for the faint of heart. And I would disagree that I've broken any 11th Amendment. I think if you're, as a U.S. Senator, if you can't ask tough questions, and if you can't stand on your feet and defend yourself and take those tough questions, you're in the wrong ballgame. If we think that Michael Bennet is going to somehow come out and play softball, and the far left is going to come out on anybody here and play a game that is, you know, we're going to be real nice to you, it's totally a misnomer. So I think the questions I've asked have been fair, they've been spot on, and you'll probably get some more tonight.
All right, well, I just follow on with that one. One of the more lethal nicknames that have come out of Colorado politics was lawyer lobbyist, and that was lobbied at Tom Strickland. That came out of a primary, but that was used by Wayne Allard to bludgeon him actually twice. So you stand by the fact that you have not given Michael Bennet a significant weapon against what would have been who might be the eventual nominee.
Not at all, and,
Okay.
and I think I'll wind up being the Mitchell nominee, and I'm willing to take any incoming. Any
Okay.
question that you want to ask is perfectly fair.
Great. Ryan, let's go to you. You ran for Congress in 2010, which was considered a Republican year. You ran in the 7th CD and lost to Ed Perlmutter handily. What makes you think a statewide race against another Democratic incumbent will go any better?
You learn so much more when you go back in the private sector. Now, I've spent the past 6 years just running a business, taking care of my kids, and trying to just be a regular citizen. You know, having been out of office, I've grown as well. And I can tell you there's a lot of things I've learned, a lot of things I would do differently. You know, the man I am today is absolutely, I think, a better person than I've ever been. And that's because I've grown and I've learned. I'm a small business owner. I'm a military veteran, having served 5 years in the United States Navy. I'm a co-founder of one of the largest public charter schools in the state of Colorado. And I did serve the city of Aurora, the entire city of Aurora, 340,000 constituents, where I had a chance to work on and help shape the redevelopment of the Fitzsimmons redevelopment project. And so I believe that unique skill set, that experience, prepares me uniquely to contrast with Michael Bennet, who has shown time and again that he will vote with President Obama 98% of the time and do whatever the Democratic agenda tells him to do. It's time that Colorado had someone who will actually fight for Colorado in Washington, who will actually lead. And in the United States Senate, I don't intend just to be another voice. I intend to lead for Colorado and for our country.
Okay. Daryl, you're up next. Your victory at the GOP State Assembly was predicted by exactly one person. You. You dominated the event, but the event is seen as a collection of party insiders. These are folks that know the system and that appear at a state assembly. In a year that has been dominated by, specifically the Republican Party, a non-establishment candidate at the top of the ticket, how do you reconcile inside party support in a year when it doesn't seem to be much of an advantage?
Well, you know, I have to somewhat laugh at that and take issue because I'm the only candidate that went through the process. And the one thing, when you're looking across this country, people want their voice heard. When you make a calculated decision at the beginning of the campaign to bypass the base of the party, what you're saying to everybody else is you can't win the grassroots campaign. And I went through that process, and nobody else is there except for me. I'm also the only candidate that's up here that's won something. I won that debate. I won that particular state assembly.
Wouldn't you say those were that's the base of the party that showed up to an
That's not
assembly?
necessarily, it's the base of the party, but it also shows a grassroots network across the entire state, which is what you need. When you go back and you research the candidates that have petitioned on this ballot in a presidential year, they lose. The one person that can actually win, the one person that has a proven conservative voting record that people can refer to, the one person that's actually won elections, the one person that actually has the support now from the Senate Conservative Fund is me. I'm the one that can win this.
Okay. Jack, let's move on. You've taken great pride in being an outsider candidate in a year like this. It may be an advantage, as we just discussed. But the reality is that the key arguments your party had against Michael Bennet 6 years ago also apply to you. If your opponent wasn't qualified, if your opponent, assuming the general election is Michael Bennet, wasn't qualified to run 6 years ago, why are you?
You'll have to remind me, what were the key points that were used against Michael Bennet?
That he had not ever won an elected position before. That the first election he ever won was for U.S. Senate, which
So not
would be
public
your
policy,
situation.
but rather just, well,
Exactly.
I think we're in a very, very different environment today. I think it was applicable 6 years ago, perhaps, but I think what's happening today is what is relevant. And I think people across the state of Colorado, across the country for that matter, are really very concerned about the direction of our country. The incessant bickering and fighting that's taking place in Washington, D.C. has gotten us to a point of almost permanent paralysis. And we've got to get a lot of things done. And I think the root issue that we're talking about here is the fact that we've got career politicians back in Washington, people who put their own personal interests in front of the interests of the people of the United States of America, in front of the interests of the state of Colorado. They become warriors for their party, whichever party that may be. And I think we're all repulsed by that. We want to see people that are actually going to deliver results, deliver change, and move the interests of the United States forward on a consistent basis. And I think my background as a person with a successful 35-year business career and a track record of actually delivering results, of walking into entrenched bureaucracies and delivering change and delivering results in places like that as well, is well suited for what we need. We need citizen servants and citizen legislators today.
Okay. John, we'll end with you. For a brief time, you held the title of frontrunner in this campaign, in this race. But you've spent the last several weeks defending your own campaign's issues with signatures and petition onto the ballot. If you are victorious in the primary, what makes you think this issue is going to go away and will not be a problem that the Bennet campaign will bludgeon you with for the next several months?
Well, I think what's really important that we've seen over the past couple weeks is that the Democrats have identified very clearly that there's only one person that is on this stage tonight that actually poses any threat to Michael Bennet, and that's me. You know, I'm a second-generation Coloradan. I grew up on the Western Slope. My parents were 18 and 19 years old when they were married. And so I grew up in a blue-collar family. Contrast that with Michael Bennet, who is a third-generation Washington politician. He grew up in Washington, D.C., and he's only concerned about pleasing those Washington, D.C. insiders. And so I think it's very transparent when you look at what the Democrats have done. Look no further than their daily press releases. They are not concerned about anyone else on the stage except for me, and that's because they know that I will hold Michael Bennet accountable because I'm a career intelligence officer. I know the threats that we face. I know how bad the Guantanamo Bay issue is with Michael Bennet. I know how bad Iran has been, his failures on Obamacare.
Specifically about the ballot petition issue, which has dogged the campaign for several weeks now. If that becomes an issue that continues to dog you, how are you going to address that? I've heard the part about Michael Bennet. What I want to hear is how you're going to address that.
Well, and every one of us that went through that process actually has been battling through those issues, and it's a very complicated process to get on the ballot. So, you know, it's not just something that I've had to deal with. It's something that, frankly, all of us, except for one, has had to deal with. And so, you know, I think that really speaks to the fact that when you're desperate, like the Democrats are, they're going to try to find issues that they'll make a mountain out of a molehill. And the fact of the matter is, the Democrats, if they're trying to beat me over process, that means they're losing, because I'll be talking about the issues, and Michael Bennet won't be able to escape talking about the issues when I'm the nominee.
Well, speaking of issues, let's get back to it. Sean, you want to get us to your next question?
Donald Trump says America is losing on trade and that we should repeal NAFTA and impose 45% tax on imports. The right-leaning Business Roundtable disagrees. In Colorado, it says trade supports 730,000 jobs, 1 in 5, and businesses export nearly $9 billion in goods. There seems to be a divide among Republicans on this issue. How would you approach trade policy debates in the U.S. Senate? Where are we at?
We started with Robert last time. Why don't we start at the other end?
Sure.
John?
Well, I believe in free trade, but I also believe in fair trade. And I think what we have seen happen over the course of decades is now that we want to enter into free trade agreements with other countries, but sometimes those other countries cheat, and we need to hold them accountable for that. So when I'm in the United States Senate, I'm going to evaluate trade deals. I'm going to make sure that they're good for Colorado. And there have been trade deals that have been very good for Colorado. One specifically with South Korea has been fantastic for cattle ranchers in Colorado. It's lowered over the course of years a very, very large tariff that was in place, and it's created a big market for an export market here in Colorado. So it's through that lens, fair and free trade, that I will be evaluating any kind of trade agreement to protect Colorado.
Jack?
Trade is a complex subject, and the concept that we want fair and a level playing field in all situations, I don't subscribe to that specifically. I think we actually need to be intelligent and negotiate from strength. We swing an awfully big stick in the international markets. We bring a huge marketplace to the global marketplace, and I think that we need to have trade agreements that are very specific on a country-by-country basis. These massive regional trade agreements, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, concern me greatly. It concerns me that we would be turning over authority to a third party to actually enforce some of those provisions. I like what it did in the sense that it did open up some agricultural markets for the state of Colorado. At the same time, I really oppose the concept of fast-track approval of agreements of that sort. These are way too important to give one individual the authority to pursue agreements of that significance. The Senate needs to maintain that kind of oversight. I traded internationally for a good part of my career. I traded in China, and it always befuddled me how difficult it was for me to get my own business into China and trade in China, while the Chinese were able to trade absolutely freely in our country, in the United States of America. So I'm not here to defend what Donald Trump has to say, but I will say I agree with him in the sense that I think we've negotiated some very poor trade agreements for the United States of America, and we can do much better.
Darrell?
I think it highlights a very important issue, and the fact is that I believe in the American worker. I believe in free trade. But we also need to make sure that we're bargaining from a position of strength. We are strongest when we deal with our debt issue. We are strongest when we actually deal with the corporate tax rate so that we become more competitive. We are stronger when we actually realize that if we become energy independent, then we can really go out there and compete. There's a lot of currency manipulation that's going on right now, but until we actually deal with the structural issues that is basically impacting us, that's going to be the problem. And here you have the current administration and Mr. Bennett. They're killing coal jobs here in this community. That's something that we can't stand for. That's why Mr. Bennett needs to be replaced. That's why I'm committed to beating him.
Right.
As a fiscal and economic conservative, one of the things I absolutely believe is economic growth for all Americans. And when I look at the world stage, I think about just the numbers. The United States of America, those of us on the stage, our friends, family, and loved ones, and those we don't know here in our country, we make up 5% of the world's population. 5%. That means 95% of the world's population live outside our borders. Let me tell you, Sean, as a Republican, I will stand with a Republican president when I believe they are right, and I will stand against a Republican president when I believe they're in the wrong. And I believe free trade that certainly protects our American work and our American business is important because we have an opportunity to reignite the American spirit and allow more of our entrepreneurs to do business not only here in their backyards and their neighborhoods, but outside of our country, giving them an opportunity to be prosperous and to pass on that wealth to their children and their grandchildren. So in this case, I think Donald Trump is wrong, and that's the bottom line.
Thank you, Robert.
Well, on the far end down here, let's again take a little different approach. As somebody that's more from a mindset out of the Austrian school, that the minimalist amount of engagement we can have that interrupts free trade and interrupts the free market is probably a better thing. Let's talk about how we negotiate these deals, because that's really been the substantive problem in all of these deals, both trade-wise and from an international foreign policy standpoint. As somebody that for years fed their family family by negotiating. I can tell you that we have violated almost every tenet that I would teach any leader how to go about negotiating a deal. Always from a position of strength, always willing to walk away, always with your best interest in hand, always controlling the communications, and always on point. We don't do any of those things anymore. So if you look at the deals that are out there, whether it's TPP or whether it's the Iranian deal, we have a group of people in Washington who have been there for decades that don't have the abilities and the competencies to do what's necessary. You leave the same people there, you get the same outcomes. You put different people in with different abilities, you get different outcomes. It's really that simple.
So you agree with Donald Trump on trade?
No, I wouldn't. Donald Trump and I have a lot of things we agree on, but I think I'm a free marketer. I'm a free market trade person. But the one thing we haven't talked about here, which we could talk about at length, is currency manipulation. You can't enter into, again, position of strength. You can't enter into a negotiation for a legitimate trade deal if the other party is somehow manipulating the currency and giving them an unfair marketplace advantage. That's what's happening. Although the TPP doesn't directly engage China, it is certainly focused at China from a trade standpoint. So there's certain fundamentals that we need to get in front of the cart instead of behind the cart.
All right. We're going to play the format a little bit again. We're going to go with some more specific questions for each candidate. They'll be coming from Eric and Sean. Sean, do you want to kick it off?
I can. This one's for you, Jack. A bill was just introduced that would require major presidential candidates to publicly disclose their 3 most recent personal income tax returns. Donald Trump has refused to release his tax returns, saying, quote, "It's none of your business." Do you think Trump should release his tax returns? Why or why not? And should you release your CSU performance record?
2 questions there. The first one has to do with financial disclosure, and all of us on stage here have had to gone through a significant financial disclosure process, which we have completed. Actually, we're a day or 2 away from completing that process. I think transparency is critical. We need to establish that the people who are representing us in Washington, D.C. have no conflicts of interest, and if they do have conflicts, we need to know exactly what they are. With regard to my performance review, I stand by my record at Colorado State University. It's significantly public. There are laws in the state of Colorado, laws across the country that make it illegal for an employer to release an employee's personnel review. And the reason for that is those one-on-one conversations when you're coaching someone up, trying to help them have a better career, are really important, and I respect that enormously. Robert, for example, just about a week ago lost his campaign manager, and he was asked at that point in time if he would talk about what happened, and his response was, no, it's a private, confidential personnel matter, and he refused to talk about it. So I think we're on the same page that these things actually do
Jack,
have some...
I guess it's time.
So tax returns are different than the review?
You're confusing
tax
apples
returns
and oranges here.
Okay.
Tax returns are different. Those do demonstrate conflicts of interest and whether or not you are representing the state of Colorado with complete impartiality.
You brought up Robert. Robert, respond, we'll move forward.
We're talking apples and oranges here. In one case, we're talking about a document performance review that was negative, that said that the individual was not trustworthy, and that the individual said later that was fabricated, and I quote, fabricated and illegally released. That was not true. Jack did not tell the truth. The next day he came back and tried to spin it back a different direction and said the process was fabricated. The fact is that performance review is out there, and it should be a matter of public record for this reason. If I'm going to run, and I'm going to run as somebody that you want to trust, and you want to send me to Washington to represent you and your children and your kids, I think it's a very fair question. That's why I asked the question as a follow-up to the debate when the question was asked. So I think Jack needs to release that tax, or that not the tax return, but that performance review, and stand accountable for whatever's in it.
And I think he's saying there's a double standard here because you won't release your employees.
There was no performance review. In the normal ebb and flows of campaigns, people come and go. You've been doing this for a lot of years. You know that. We upgraded, and we've got an announcement we're going to make tomorrow.
Let me jump in here, and I'm actually going to go to you, Ryan. So you'll have your chance here, but it's a different question.
Sure.
Obviously, you're struggling as we tape this some days
Eric,
before.
I'm going to stop you right there. I'm not struggling at all. In fact, the court just came out today. I'm good. And so,
Well, let me finish my question.
yeah.
I'll amend my question, but I'll finish it. And that applies to some other candidates here, too. Basically, how you have achieved access to this ballot or
Sure.
a position on this ballot is through a theory called substantial compliance.
Yeah.
I look at you five gentlemen, and as constitutional conservatives, you all believe that the Constitution should be interpreted rather literally. Yet, for a number of you, in terms of getting on the ballot, there's been a standard of quote-unquote substantial compliance, not complete compliance. Isn't that a bit hypocritical? Isn't that a juxtaposition between getting on the ballot through something less than total compliance with the rules and procedures of how to get there?
Absolutely not, Eric. In fact, couldn't be further from it. You know, this is about the spirit and intent of the voter. You have to ask yourself, if the law is so stuck in the last century that it prevents real people, valid Republicans, who have expressed a support for someone to be on the ballot, should that voter's intent be thrown away? I think that's the reason we have the law, so that it can be interpreted by the courts, and the courts have done that time and again. You know, Darrell was talking about how he has a lot of grassroots support. I think every one of us on this stage will tell you that we believe we have grassroots support. I got 18,500 people that signed my petitions. And the reality is I've traveled all throughout Colorado, and I've heard from so many folks who've said to me, Ryan, we want you to be our next United States Senator because we know you're going to fight for us. You're going to fight for a better America. And so absolutely not. Is this any
I just
any
want
way,
to follow up a little bit,
sure.
which is a whole lot of people on the other side of the political spectrum believe that the job of a justice or a judge is to interpret laws in keeping with current situations and not necessarily historic precedent. Aren't you trying to have your cake and eat it too?
Well, I always say, why have cake if you can't eat it too first? You know, I mean, that's the point. but the bottom line is that, Eric, in this particular case, I'm not just on the ballot, but every vote will count for me. We have fought to fix a broken system because we have said time and again, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of valid Republican voters whose voices deserve to be heard. The law does not say that these individuals should not have a voice. It says that the spirit and intent of the voter should count. And that's what we've been fighting for. And I'm very proud to say today that what we've said from the very beginning, that we know we had enough signatures to qualify for the ballot. It's unfortunate that any of us had to go through this process, but the reality is this: the voter's voice will count. The courts have agreed with us, and now we continue to travel the state of Colorado to talk about the issues people care about, how we get more Coloradans working, how we get our fiscal situation under control, and we do what needs to be done to move America and Colorado in a better direction.
Well, my name was invoked, so we were talking about the fact that I am a strict constructionist. The court should only look and determine whether or not the Secretary of State did its job. This whole substantial compliance standard needs to be thrown out and addressed in the next cycle. I'm sorry. That's what the role of the Secretary of State is. That's been the frustration right now with the judicial activism. And that's what needs to change. You either go through the assembly that way, or you go through the process that's certified by the Secretary of State. If you don't make it that way, if you have to appeal it to the court should just determine whether or not those processes were followed, yes or no, and then that's done.
Let's move forward.
Bottom line.
Let's move forward.
I have a question for you, Robert,
Yes.
so I'm glad you want to speak. In a previous debate, you referred to the issue of transgender rights as, quote, politically correct, left-wing nutcase issues. Do you believe laws that prohibit transgender people from using the bathroom they identify with violate a person's civil rights, or are they just being too sensitive?
Well, that's a good gotcha question, but let me tell you the context that was asked. It is, because let me tell you the context it was asked in. And the question is, do you believe that anybody should be able to use any restroom at any time? I do not. And I will stand by that, and here's why. I've got a number of grandkids, and I don't want to have somebody who decides on a given day they feel a certain way to go be using a restroom because they choose to use a restroom that way. I believe there's biological issues there. I believe there's safety issues there, and I think it's crystal clear. But let me give a specific example. When I was asked that question, let's talk about your normal target. Your normal target, there's about 1,800 targets in this country. Okay, on any given day, there's thousands of people in each one of those targets. We're talking about making rules and regulations for less than 5 people per target. So of the thousands of people that are in there, the thousands of people that choose to use, I think I will stand by. We've become so politically correct in this country that we've lost the forest for the trees.
Okay.
Let's move on with our specific questions. Eric?
Daryl, I get to ask you one. Yeah. There are very few smart observers out there who think what the U.S. Senate lacks right now are more rigid ideologues. Most smart observers believe what the U.S. Senate lacks are people of either party who can work across party lines and try to find some consensus and some compromise. Your appeal here to that party convention that gave you that top nod overwhelmingly was very much based on a pretty strong and rigid ideology. How do you go to Washington and be effective and work across party lines, not just make speeches, but get something done?
I think your question exemplifies what's wrong with America and the frustration that's out there. You don't get it. The bottom line is it's not about reaching across the aisle. The bottom line is about its leadership. You need to actually have a leader to stand up there and represent the values of what's going on in this country. Coming up with a plan to actually lead when it comes to areas, when it comes to whether it's the Iran nuclear deal, when it comes to national security, when it comes to energy independence, when it comes to comprehensive tax reform. What we need are people that are willing to actually stand for something. People are tired of politicians saying one thing to get elected and then going to Washington, D.C. and completely selling out to special interests. Everybody that you kind of captured, as far as the ones that are saying that we don't need more rigid ideologues, are sitting here today wondering why we have Donald Trump right now as our presumptive nominee. The reason why is the people in Washington, D.C. are so disconnected to what's actually happening on the ground. And I represent exactly what's happening on the ground. I'm the one that can actually go out there and win and do it the right way and actually have a record where you can show that I get things done, not just talk about it.
John, we don't want you to feel left out here. So last year you said that the most critical part of the gun control legislation at the state capitol is the background checks. You now say that those background checks are unconstitutional. What changed?
No, nothing changed. And so when we were talking about the 2013 gun control measures that were passed by the Democrats, I immediately said those were unconstitutional, and I stand by that. You know, Michael Bennet has said that, in fact, he believes that the 2013 gun laws that resulted in the recall of many liberals in this state and the ultimate change in control of the Senate in Colorado, he wants to take those unconstitutional gun laws and actually spread those out all over America. So my quote there that you're referring to, Sean, is a good one. And what people do care about is making sure that we're not giving violent criminals an opportunity to go and walk into a retail store and purchase a firearm. And so a background check is okay. And the NRA agrees with that, by the way. But the key is that we have to make sure that the background check is not infringing on the rights of the law-abiding citizen. And by the way, I'm the only one on the stage that has raised my hand and has carried a gun in war and has said that I will support and defend the Constitution, including the Second Amendment, if needed, with my life. So I believe so firmly that we have to protect our Second Amendment. And we were talking earlier about the potential vote on Merrick Garland. That's why we should actually discuss that a little bit more, because there's very big differences between some of us on who believes that Merrick Garland should receive a vote. The NRA says that he will take away gun rights. I believe that. He should not be allowed to have the opportunity to replace Justice Scalia, and I would fight against that.
Well, time out. John said something that's just not true. You're not the only one, John, who's ever raised your hand to serve this country. There's three of us on this stage who've worn a uniform with a gun. I got it.
The only one that's been to war.
But to be clear, I've supported the wars. Yeah. Working in intelligence. I made sure people like you who were on the ground, and thank you for your service, had the information that you need to help fight the wars. And so I want to be clear. There are three veterans on this stage. I'm sure we have patriots in both Robert and Jack who believe in our country. But I've put my hand up. I've sworn that oath. I've served my country for 5 years, and quite frankly, it's made me a better man.
Yeah, and I also want to be able to weigh in on that question, and it concerns me because it draws a divide in here, because it takes the entire system, the entire sphere, to be able to support the war-fighting effort. This shows a level of immaturity from Mr. Kaiser. He needs to actually be able to step up and rectify that.
With only 2 minutes before.
So, Dominic, I was referenced there real quick. I do want to just correct. I misspoke a little bit. Certainly meant I'm the only one that's been to war, and as a matter of fact, I've been to war twice. I served in our country in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I received the Bronze Star Medal for doing that. And so I do certainly believe that I thank everyone for their service. That is very important. And frankly, we're
Let's
at a
keep it
time in
rolling.
our nation's history where we have the fewest people that have been to war that are serving in our nation in the U.S. Capitol. And that's very concerning to me. Now
John,
we need to send
John,
warriors
thank you
to
on that. We're
Washington.
going to keep moving. We only have about a minute and a half before we get to closing statements. So you have time for one of these very short answer questions. Eric, you have one on deck?
In a previous debate in Colorado Springs a number of weeks ago, I believe the topic came up of the 17th Amendment, which has been a part of the Constitution now for, I believe, 102 years, where we have a popular vote for the U.S. Senate. No longer do state legislators select our U.S. senators. Who here, let's go down the list, we'll start with John, supports the 17th Amendment as is? Is there anyone who would repeal it?
I've said that I support the 17th Amendment, but I would do this. As a United States Senator, as opposed to Michael Bennett, I would focus very hard on working with our state legislators at the Capitol, because I did serve in the state Capitol, and I would continue to do that, helping make sure that we look out for Colorado
Very short
interests.
answers, please. Jack?
I would not repeal the 17th Amendment. The people of Colorado should elect our senators, not the legislature.
Darrell?
I support the 17th Amendment.
I support the 17th Amendment, but I do think as United States Senator, I have an obligation to go back to the state legislature and have a dialogue and conversation about what's going on in Colorado.
Robert, I believe you're the one on record as questioning it.
Well, I support the 17th Amendment as is. However, there is a real 10th Amendment issue there that we need to actually have a adult conversation as a country about. There's a lot of people when you travel around this state that are very concerned that we do not have a voice, that they do not have a real voice through their state legislature on who that senator is.
Actually, Robert, in that forum in El Paso County, you made abundantly clear that you would work hard to repeal the 17th Amendment.
I said, no, I didn't. I said that I would
think
be
there's a
willing to
videotape
look
that
at it.
established
Yeah.
that.
Let's answer that quickly so we have to get the closing statements.
Are we to
Just say
closing
that.
statements already?
We are. An hour
Time flies when you're having fun.
It certainly
Time just
does. An
flies
hour
when
can
you're
go by
having fun.
very quickly, especially in the studio. We picked numbers out of a hat before the taping began to figure out the order of the closing statements. So let's start with Ryan. You're first up for your 1 minute closing statement, please.
Thank you for having us, and thanks for watching. You know, I think about our country and where it's headed. As I've talked to Coloradans all across this state, people are fundamentally concerned about the direction of the country. They know we can do so much better, but it's going to take different people who are committed to working hard for Colorado and for our country. That's been the story of my life. I've worked hard for everything I've ever gotten, and I wasn't given much. A lot of love, faith in God, and a commitment to working to make a life for myself and my family. I believe this election is so much more important than any one of us on this stage. And it's going to require someone who will go and fight about the issues, work to fix the issues as it relates to how we get our economy going and getting more Coloradans working, how we keep America safe, how we take steps to secure our border and deal with illegal immigration, and we repeal Obamacare with consumer choice so we can bring down the cost of health care for more Coloradans, for more Americans. I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for your support. My name is Ryan Fraser. Let's reignite the American spirit.
Ryan, thank you very much. Jack, you're up next.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit redundant. I talked earlier about how concerned all of us are about the incessant bickering and fighting that's going on in Washington, D.C. And we are in a state of almost permanent paralysis. And I do believe that we're in desperate need of a change in leadership and a change in culture and a change in behavior back in Washington, D.C. And I'm not a career politician. I had a 35-year successful business career. We did build a successful business. I do believe that the core issue in Washington, D.C. is career politicians who put their interests and their partisan politics in front of the interests of the people of the United States of America. I do have a track record that establishes that I have walked into an entrenched bureaucracy, changed the behavior, changed the culture, and delivered results at the same time. And we are going to face that exact same dynamic times 10 when we go back to Washington, D.C. And I will take that same level of commitment to deliver those kinds of results for the people of the state of Colorado. I'm Jack Graham, and I'd appreciate your support in June. Thank you very much.
Jack, thank you. Darrell, you're up next.
I'm Darrell Glenn. You're hearing a lot about let's make America great again. I have a bit of a different take. It's time for Colorado to lead. And I'm asking you to trust me. As an Air Force Academy graduate, retired lieutenant colonel, somebody with a 13-year proven conservative voting record, I'm asking you to trust me. I understand what we need to do when it comes to defending this country and rebuilding the military. I understand what we need to do when it comes to energy independence. I understand fiscal responsibility and how frustrating it is to have $19 trillion worth of debt and people not willing to actually stand up and do the right thing. I get it. I've been out there since last January talking to each and every one of you. I am here for you. I'm Darrell Glenn. Go to electdarrellglenn.com. We're going to win this race. Put me in, Coach. If you want to close the deal, I'm the one that can do it.
Thank you, Darrell. John, you're up next.
Well, thank you for having us. And, I was recently down in Pueblo, Colorado, just the other day, and I heard from people down in Pueblo what I've heard, frankly, around the state of Colorado, as I put about 15,000 miles on my truck in the last couple months. And it's been continually the same thing. People are very frustrated. They're frustrated because they send people to Washington, D.C., and then they don't deliver. They don't do what they say they're going to do. And I'm different. I believe in term limits, and I'm the only one on the stage that has committed to serving only 2 terms in the United States Senate. You'll see that when you look at your ballot. I'm a Colorado native. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate and a combat veteran that served in Iraq and Afghanistan. I know what it takes to keep this country safe, to keep this country secure, and to keep us economically prosperous. So if you believe that the number one job, like our founders did, if you believe the number one job of the federal government is to keep our country safe, is national security, if you believe that we need to protect the Second Amendment, if you believe that we need to secure our borders, if you believe we need to repeal Obamacare, then I'm your candidate. I will fight for you in Washington, D.C. My name is John Kaiser, and I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Robert, wrap it up for us.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having us. I've been writing about term limits for 5, 6, 7 years now. I've signed all the pledges on term limits, but this is a very unique year. This is a year where the voice of the outsider for a long time has been kind of squelched. And there's an opportunity here to get people with different abilities involved in the game. I'm thrilled to be in the hunt. We're doing phenomenal as far as going out and listening to people and actually talking about changing what has happened in Washington. And I'd leave everybody with this one thought, because I think it's a big thought. Einstein said it best, and I think he said it better than I could. But if we send the same people with the same abilities to do the same thing, we're going to get the same results. And Einstein called that insanity. In my case, what I've done for the last 30 years is train leaders, teach leaders how to do something fundamentally different. I want that opportunity in Washington. I'm Robert Blaha. Go to Robert Blaha. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
You cut me off.
That is all the time we have for our look at the U.S. Senate Republican primary race. I'd like to thank our candidates for joining us: Robert Blaha, Ryan Frazier, Darrell Glenn, Jack Graham, and John Kaiser. I'd like to thank my fellow panelists, Eric Sonderman and Sean Boyd. And if you would like to find out more information about any of the primary election races, please visit our websites, cpt12.org, cbsdenver.com, and koanewsradio.com. Be sure to tune in every Friday this fall, starting right after Labor Day at 9 p.m. as we cover all the major ballot issues and congressional races on this fall's general election ballot. For everyone here at Colorado Public Television, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching. Si. Due.
You want to stay in here? Sure. They're all leaving. If you want to catch anybody. Do you have that?
They're gonna run and they're gonna get the tape to you. They're just grabbing it right now.
Okay, I'll be right out here.
Cool.
I was like, free food in the get out of here.
Free for there's no food in the conference room.
I'm like, just keep going. Yeah, you're almost there. Okay, we're ready to do the problem. Count. Okay, are you gonna count me out though, so you can time me? Okay. Think everything went well?
Yeah. The debate's got the tape.
Zoom has to. They were streaming live too.
That too.
Yeah. So maybe we're not seeing those chairs up.
With,
Restarts and all, we're live.
hey, it's live TV. We'll do it live.
Yeah.
I love that. What's his face used to use all the time? Who?
Yeah, I don't want to see that button.
This button?
No, you're fine. I want them to zoom past it.
Oh.
Yes, we're ready.